All right, I just wanted to cover a couple things here in this video. The first part of this applies to everybody, so you can all watch this part. Just wanted to say Happy 4th of July. We're doing a little 4th of July marathon today. 159 up to 164, so we're getting 5 episodes just today. Then tomorrow, we're getting 1 episode, so that gets us to 165, so Friday ends up with a 5, as usual. Then on Monday, we're getting extra episodes next week. I'm not sure how I'm going to divide it out. Probably 2 on Monday and then 2 on Friday and 1 other somewhere. Because we're getting a total of 8 episodes next week. Because we've got 166 to 169. Then we've got a couple filler we're skipping. We're skipping 170, 171. Is that right? Oh, I see. I just wrote it down wrong. Okay. What's actually happening is next week we're getting 166 to 169. 170, 171 are fillers, so we're skipping those. And then we're doing 172 to 175. So I think that's a total of 9 episodes or something. I'll figure it out later, but almost every day next week's going to get 2 episodes. One day won't. So that'll probably be Thursday or some shit. So the point being, I wanted to skip the filler, but still end up with 175. Then 176 through 196 or something like that is filler. So a week from Monday, we start with 197. So that's pretty much the plan. Basically, because of 4th of July, the holiday, and then, because of filler, we're getting a shit ton of extra episodes. We started Monday, just a couple days ago, 156. And several weeks from then, 2 weeks from then, we will be at 197. So, pulling out filler, of course. But still, that's a pretty big jump. So, it can sometimes be confusing, so I just wanted to describe that's what's going on here. We're getting in a 4th of July marathon. And then, like I said, next week's going to be pretty full. So, should be fun. And I have actually watched several episodes. I'm up to, as I record this, I'm about to do episode 161. So I've already seen 159 and I've seen 160. Those are great episodes. Then I remembered this is all part of a 4th of July marathon. So, I'd also already recorded a little theory video I did. And that's going to come right after this, same video. And that only matters if you like behind the scenes stuff. I explain more in a minute because I've already recorded that video. But I just want to come back here and do a welcome to my 4th of July marathon introduction to the video. I'm going to stick that video at the beginning of the marathon before 159 and we go from there. See, it's all timey-wimey stuff. Stuff is recorded out of sequence just like in filmmaking, and then it all makes sense when you get into the editing room. So, all right, well, enjoy your 4th of July. So this theory of mine is a quasi-serious theory. It doesn't impact the plot at all. This is not a theory of what I think is going to happen in the plot. It's a theory about what I think might have happened behind the scenes. So if you're not interested in that, you might as well go ahead and check out now. That's all this video is going to be about. It's a theory. I have a theory about one tiny component of this series I think could have been inspired by real life events, or as a reference or an homage, a cheeky little reference, maybe, possibly. Behind the scenes, nothing to do with the plot. So if you only want plot theories, go ahead and get lost. The rest of us, let's check this out. Okay, in the early '80s, Steven Spielberg was the hotshot young director. He had done Jaws, he had done Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was in pre-production. He'd already signed a contract to do E.T. and was in pre-production, but they were building sets. They were constructing props. He basically had 3 or 4 months off where he wasn't doing jack shit. He had already written a script, Poltergeist, and he loved this movie. He was very hands-on. He had helped make the storyboards. He had helped with casting. He had helped with the decisions on set locations and stuff like that, location scouting, all that kind of stuff. He had input on wardrobe, everything. He would have directed it, but because he was already in pre-production on E.T., his contract with, I think it was Universal, whoever did E.T., his contract with him didn't allow him to work on any other movie until E.T. was done. So he's sitting there twiddling his thumbs, he's bored, and he had this script, and the script had already gotten financing, and somebody else was going to have to direct it. So he turned to a good friend of his and had a good friend of his direct it, right? But he was on set for all but 3 days. There was only 3 days where he was not on set, Steven Spielberg. He was very hands-on. The very first day, he was given direction, and the guy who was actually directing the movie was given direction. And as a matter of fact, some of you might actually believe that Steven Spielberg directed Poltergeist. A lot of people believe it. Just like a lot of people think Tim Burton directed A Nightmare Before Christmas. Tim Burton did not direct A Nightmare Before Christmas. He wrote the story. He was very involved. He had a lot of input. He was a story consultant. He was a filmmaking consultant, but he didn't direct. Same thing here. Steven Spielberg did not direct Poltergeist. A lot of people think he did. But he was very hands-on. He was there all but 3 days. He directed second unit. Like I said, he did all the storyboards with the guy who's director, and basically, and remember, he was only not on set for 3 days out of the entire production. It was like several months they were shooting. There was only 3 days he wasn't on set. When he was on set, people deferred to him. People went to him with problems and issues. Hey, what about this? What about that? You know. So a lot of people got the impression he was doing what's called shadow directing. Like he was directing through a proxy because he wasn't allowed by contract to actually be the director. In fact, the actual director would say action, Steven Spielberg would say cut. This is how closely tied together they were. It was almost like the Wachowski siblings would direct a movie. The two of them were both directing. It's almost like that. It's almost like co-directors. That's how involved Steven Spielberg was. One day, I think it was Vanity Fair or one of these magazines, showed up on set, and Steven Spielberg was in the front yard of the house location. And he was directing the kids. He was directing second unit and was directing the kids, and some kids would be running around playing in the yard or something like that. Meanwhile, the real director was in the backyard, and he was shooting the scene where they're burying some animal. I can't remember if it's a dog or a cat or a bird or something. They're burying something. And so the girl's crying, and I think the mother's in that scene. So you've got the daughter, the mother. They've got this hole in the ground. They have the prop to put it in the ground, and that's the actual director's directing that scene in the backyard, out of sight. Steven Spielberg's directing second unit stuff here in the front yard. So the reporters pull up, and that's what they see. And that was a lasting impression. They show up on set, Steven Spielberg up front, out in the open, in front of God and everybody. He's actually directing. So, I assume they at some point made their way to the back. But, who's to say who's the director and who's the second unit director in that situation? I do think in what I just described to you, the actual director of the movie was directing the more important scene. It's an emotional scene. If you've ever seen Poltergeist, they're burying the animal, the daughter's crying. It's an emotional scene. Shooting stuff like kids playing in the yard and running around and getting close up to the feet, that's literally second unit stuff. So clearly on that day he was doing second unit stuff, but he's there front and center. That's the first thing they see when they show up. And that was a lasting impression because the press wasn't on set every day. That just happened to be a day they were on set. Okay, so movie comes out. Then some people want to take Steven Spielberg down a notch. Some people are just studio execs are pissed off that they think Steven Spielberg got around this contract and shadow directed a movie, which was against the rules. And some people actually feel bad for the actual director. And so there's these people lobbying the Writers Guild, the people were lobbying the Directors Guild to investigate and find out, well, did Steven Spielberg actually direct the effing movie or not? What happened here? And so they did. And the Directors Guild ended up deciding that Steven Spielberg had broken a lot of rules and that the studio who did Poltergeist should have stepped in and put a stop to it and made him not be on set so much. He had too much control. He's just a force of his personality. It's like Dr. House walking into a hospital room. It doesn't matter there could be 3 people in that room who are House's boss. He has the magnetism. He has the character. He has the talent. He has the reputation. All eyes are on him. People only want to know what House says. They don't care about his boss's boss, and his boss's boss's boss. Nobody cares what they have to say. They just want to hear what House says because he has the magnetism. Same thing with Spielberg. He walks on set. He has the magnetism. Nobody cares about this other director. Okay, so the Writers Guild found that infractions were made, that maybe Steven Spielberg didn't shadow direct the movie, but he definitely took too many liberties. They ended up granting the actual director, the real director of this movie, another $150,000 as compensation for these violations of him, like he'd just been violated. In interviews at the time, Spielberg talked about, because Poltergeist and E.T. came out one week apart, he talked about, this is the summer of Spielberg. Poltergeist is a movie I love, E.T. is a movie I really wanted to make, and he basically taking credit for both movies, even though he didn't direct one of them. And people would ask, and you should look up these quotes. There's a great podcast. It was a shit show podcast talking about it. It came out a few years ago. I remember when it came out. It was a shit show podcast. It's a great podcast. They talk about all kinds of shit shows. This movie was definitely a shit show. So There's more details there. But Steven Spielberg is giving quotes basically saying he did it. Later on, years later, he would say, well, I was young and stupid and I took liberties. Still basically saying he directed the movie. The real director never really got the credit he deserved, and he never did another major Hollywood production. And nobody knows if he was blackballed because they thought, well, look at him, he's so weak, he let another guy come in and direct his movie, even though he was the official director. Other people think it was because it was just embarrassing. And some people think maybe he just was sick of Hollywood after this. He's like, well, I'm not going to get screwed over like this. So he never did another... this guy, by the way, before Poltergeist, he did the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. But after Poltergeist, he never did another major Hollywood movie. He didn't, he died about 7 years ago. And mostly B movies. He had a nice little directing career doing B movies, but he never did another major Hollywood movie. He kind of got screwed over in this whole situation. And he never really came out in an interview and said, yes, I directed movies, Steven Spielberg didn't direct it. So he seems kind of bitter. Steven Spielberg seems like at some point he gives an apology, like I shouldn't have done what I did. Nobody's ever came out and said, hey, Spielberg did really direct a movie. But he pretty much did. He had his hand up the other guy's ass. The other guy, the guy who really directed the movie, came across as a bumbling moron, an inefficient dumbass, a joke. He came across as a joke. The real director of the movie came across as a joke. Steven Spielberg was the power behind the throne. He was the real director. He was legit. He's the person everybody takes seriously. This other director, the guy who actually directed the movie, is some bumbling little moron, right? Can't even walk across the yard without tripping over himself. And his name is Tobe. Tobe Hooper. Now, it's spelled differently. Tobe, not Tobi. But I wonder, this all happened in 1982. Anybody who was a genre fan in the 80s, who grew up in the 80s, would have heard about all this. I don't know how old the person who did Naruto is, but he would have been probably, because Naruto started, when did the manga start? 1990? Somewhere around there? Matter of fact, let me check my work here. It started in 1999. Okay. So, 1999... if he started writing it, matter of fact, let me check my work again. How old is the author? He was born in 1974. He would have been 6 years old in 1980, and he would have been 16 in 1990, which means he probably would have been, the time he would have watched Poltergeist would have been in the mid-80s when all this would have been out there. Maybe he's catching up on genre movies. I don't know if you ever saw the movie. I don't know if there's anything to this theory whatsoever. But I can totally see him being a fan of all these horror movies and all these action movies and all these genre movies, American genre movies of the 80s. He would have been the perfect age for all that. I can totally see him hearing about this and hearing about Tobe has somebody else's hand up his ass and he's a bumbling idiot and he's been besmirched and everybody's making fun of him when it turns out he's the power behind the throne all along. If you pull your Tobe mask off, Tobe Hooper mask off, it's actually Steven Spielberg directed the movie. I wonder if this is a reference. I could be completely talking out of my ass. I just think it's an interesting coincidence. There are parallels here. I can create a conspiracy theory and think that, like, the author is like, hey, this is another one of my 50 jokes I'm going to throw into. Little references, right? That's all I think it is. I think it's a reference. Something that amused him. So I'll leave it here. You can decide on your own or what you think, but I think it makes me laugh. It makes me fun. I think it's funny. Tobe had a tragic life, man. I would love to, if I was Tobe Hooper, I would love to know that I was actually a badass in an anime. Everybody thinks I'm a bumbling moron, and it turns out I'm a badass. That would be cool, don't you think? So, like I said, not too serious, but I do kind of believe it. I honestly do kind of believe that this happened. So, yeah, if you know better, if the author's ever talked about it, if he ever confirmed it, that would actually be really hilarious if he had done that. All right, well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get to my reactions. I just thought this was something funny.